Schweikart for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. When I first got here, there was sort of a joke. There were two ways to get in trouble around here. One was to say something stupid, and one was to tell everyone the truth they don't want to hear. We're going to see if I can get myself in trouble tonight. I've come behind this microphone repeatedly over the last few years trying to do the math. If you're one of the people around this campus, because we're probably right now on 1,000 televisions around this campus, and you actually care about the math, please give me a little bit of your time. I've never done a set of presentation that actually has made my stomach turn more than this. We have spent the last couple weeks with my joint economic economist. I'm blessed to be on the Ways and Means Committee. I chair oversight, but I also am the senior Republican on joint economic, meaning I have some freaky smart people at work for me. And we've been trying to figure out what the math looks like for this nation a decade from now. Remember, we have lots of people who ran this last election saying, we're going to balance the budget in 10 years. Wonderful. Do you understand the math? So we actually sat down and broke apart every document we could find, every projection from CBO. And I care a lot about this. I accept I'm an older dad. My wife and I spent years trying to adopt. We were able to adopt an amazing little girl. She's 7. And we just are in the process of finishing up adopting her brother, who's 7 months old. So yes, my wife and I are 60 years old, and we have a 7-month-old. So we are pathologically optimistic about this country. But please, look at the math I'm about to show you, and then tell me what you are willing to advocate to save my little boys, my daughter's future, your kids' future, your own retirement. Okay. CBO baseline, Congressional Budget Office baseline. If we just keep doing what we're doing, and there's no recession, there's no war, there's no more pandemic in 2034, so that is 10 budget cycles from right now. The baseline number is we'll be borrowing $2.6 trillion that single year. And it gets worse from there because the next year, Social Security Trust Fund is gone, and we always made the assumption that when it blows up, you're not going to double senior poverty in this country. And this is not a non sequitur. I was just so angry at the president's speech last night on the comments about, promise me you're not going to cut Social Security and Medicare. We're not going to cut Social Security and Medicare, but are you promising you're going to work with us to save it? Where was the discussion saying all the data says in 10 years the trust fund is gone and there's a 23% cut out there? And I'm going to show you at the end of this slide deck that the pandering from my brothers and sisters on the left, just raise the taxes. It doesn't fix the problem. It doesn't even come close. And instead of having a moral discussion from this podium over here saying we're going to not let doubling of senior poverty happen in this country, we're going to work together. It was used for a campaign kickoff. This number here is the baseline. So for all of us running around saying we're going to balance it in 10 years, great. You have a structural $2.6 trillion on 2034. That's 10 budget years from now. Where are you going to get it? So let's walk through the math even more to understand where we're at in the fragility. Let's say over the next 10 years, there's 1% more interest on what CBO was projecting last year. What was 1% do to us? It basically means on that 2034, that 10-year budget from now, you're sitting at 3.1 trillion structural deficit. That's every year. That's the baseline deficit with just 1 point change in interest rates. You're going to balance in 10 years. I want to balance in 10 years. You find me $3.1 trillion that will be gone in 10 years. Do you understand how bad the math is? But we're going to talk about the shiny objects around here. Oh, there's a balloon. The balloon's a problem. Oh, there's this. It's a problem. This is what will take down the republic. And it's hard to talk about it. It's math. And I don't know how to make math necessarily interesting. But it always wins. And we produced this chart, and I know this one's geeky. We basically took all the CBO projections, and we partially stole this from others, so I can't, our economic team can't take all the credit for it. What it's basically telling you is most of the projections, almost all the projections from CBO have been far too optimistic. So when I'm showing you numbers, I'm basing them on the CBO numbers, and oh, by the way, historically, they've been far too optimistic. You get the punchline? Now, the only other caveat I need to give you on the math is because it's going to take 10 days or so to calculate it. We haven't done the interest adjustment, so I'm going to show you on some of these of what would happen if we got rid of this portion of discretionary, if we got rid of all discretionary, got rid of defense, did this. Okay, you have interest savings there. I have not done that calculation yet. And there's a whole other concept I've talked about here, that if we could convince the debt markets here and around the world that buy all this U.S. sovereign debt, that we might get lower interest rates because they realize we're starting to be serious about what the future looks like, and that we're really serious that we are going to have capacity to manage our future debt, that we're going to suppress it, and over time, the growth. Remember, there's two sides to this ledger. We need to find a way to grow like crazy. And we're going to have to discuss things that are uncomfortable. We're going to have to discuss how to fix the immigration system, how to fix the cost of health care, how to do a tax system that is all about growth, a trade system that is about growth. Blowing up the bureaucracy in this country using technology. The regulatory state, much of it could be done through technology instead of armies of unionized employees. But we need to almost just be fixated on economic growth. And then we got to tell the truth about our demographics and what drives this debt. So remember my two caveats here. It's going to still take me a couple weeks to do all the interest calculations, but these numbers are pretty darn accurate. So let's sort of walk through it. Let's do some of the budget discussions we're all having. What would happen if I came to you tomorrow and said, hey, we're right now doing the 2024 budget, but we adopted the 2021 baseline. So this means for all discretionary spending, the FBI, the Park Service, the Defense Department, everything it is government other than the earned entitlements, the mandatory spending. We adopt the 2021 baseline, and we go from there and held constant, the 21 level. That basically means no inflation. So if you had, 2-3% inflation at the end of a decade, the purchasing power of that is 25, 28, 30% less? But you held it constant. There's no growth. You adopt the 2021 budget in this 2024 we're building on right now and say we're holding discretionary, no defense increased spending, nothing. In 10 budget years, you still have $1.9 trillion of borrowing. How many of you understand how ugly this is? And look, I will get people who will start emailing me, texting me, going into our website. I don't like what he says. It's math. And if you don't believe me, go online. All the congressional CBO reports are there. The OMB reports are there. The Social Security Actuary Report is there. That one's a little harder to read, but the CBO just did one a few days ago. That's a really easy read. But you don't get to just look at the executive summary. You got to read the whole damn thing. Take out your highlighter, go through it, and then tell me what your ideas are. I came here from the last couple weeks and said, let's walk through some of the suggestions. Hey, we'll get rid of all foreign aid. In this coming year, it takes care of like a couple weeks of borrowing. Get rid of congressional salaries. That will take care of, well, that took care of 28 minutes of borrowing for a whole year. And the numbers actually get worse. So let's have a little fun here. So let's say instead of using the 2021 baseline budget for discretionary, that's defense, that's everything that's not a mandatory spend. So we're going to now use 2019. And we're not going to let it grow at dime. So every year, inflation, that purchasing power goes down, but we're not going to do it. We're going to hold defense, so the purchasing power of defense a decade from now is what? 28, 30% less because of the inflation. You still have a $1.6 trillion borrow 10 years from now. How many of you are ready to vote for that because you promised, we're going to balance in 10 years? But it's the math. I'm going to say it over and over. Unless you have a revolution in the cost of health care, you don't do it by cutting. You do it by cures, by innovation, by competition. You've got to have a revolution. And then you have that type of competition and disruption all through government. Unless there's a revolution in growth, this is your future. This is my children's future. So let's go to the other flip side. How bad is the number really? So 10 budget years from now, which is 2034, no discretionary. No discretionary spending on defense. We basically say, hey, we trust everyone. We cuddle everyone in the world. We're all buddies. You just wiped out the Defense Department. You still have almost $1 trillion of borrowing in the 2034 budget. So let's do the opposite. If you actually look at the numbers where you had no discretionary at all, no discretionary, there's no, government as you know it is gone. There's no defense. So all the constitutional obligations we have to provide for are just gone. We walk away from the Constitution. Now, we haven't done, my caveat again, we still haven't done the interest savings calculations on the savings. And would the bond markets treat us more kindly because we're taking debt seriously because they'll know we'll have plenty of money to pay our obligations. But if you just do the straight line number, a decade from now, you're still borrowing $300 billion. That is how big the mandatory spending is. And understand, most of the debt's coming, 3/4 of it comes from the growth of Medicare. And you had a president behind that podium last night. Did he talk about the morality of us keeping our promises and the fact we're going to have to work together and do really hard things to make this economy grow, to actually add competitions in these things so we crash the price because we're going to keep our promises? Instead, it was almost sounded like pandering for the next election. Does this place have a soul? And you start to look at the reality of different scenarios. So once again, what we just did, CBO baseline, $2.6 trillion of borrowing in 10 years. If we got discretionary, we used the 2019 discretionary and just held it. No growth, no growth. You're still borrowing $1.6 trillion in 10 years. If you come and say, well, let's use the 21 budget, and we'll just take that discretionary budget on defense and everything else, and we freeze it. You're still borrowing $1.9 trillion in 10 years. How about we do this? There's no defense. Well, you're still borrowing 0.9, so almost $1 trillion. Well, what if you had non-defense? So you do this, saying, we'll pay for defense, but we get rid of all of the rest of government. You're still borrowing $1.4 trillion in 10 years. If you get rid of all discretionary, with my caveat, we haven't done the interest calculations, all the interest savings calculations. But if you do it a straight line, you're still borrowing $300 billion. I've come here dozens and dozens of different times, and I've shown the little pie chart saying, do you understand, 71% of all spending was mandatory. Now, much of these are earned benefits, and look at the shrinking part that's discretionary. Maybe doing it in reverse now, people will understand. If you're heading towards retirement, do you understand what this means to you? If you're crazy like I am, and I have a 7-month-old, this is the moral question of our time. And instead, how many speeches were behind any of these microphones today giving a damn about the country's future? Yes, but we were looking for a good political edge that will look good on my next campaign thing. And to the people who keep trolling our attempt to find a way to save the Social Security Trust Fund so you don't have grandma having to have a 23% cut in 10 years. I have one that keeps, maybe it's a bot, that keeps sending in things to our office saying, just increase the taxes, so take all income and make it subject to the Social Security tax. Okay, fine. Guess what? We found it in the Social Security Actuary Report. Go read the damn thing. If you take every dime of income in the country and do the original Social Security formula, so I'm taking 90% of all income, and what is it? Well, and forgive me, I'm going to get this wrong. Last year it was $142,000 was subject to the Social Security, 12.4%. And we basically now, I know that's going up because, and it's taking good pop because of inflation, but we basically say every dime of earnings, you make $1 million a year, every dime of your earnings is subject to the 12.4% Social Security tax. I only cover 31% of the shortfall. For my brothers and sisters on the left, read the actuarial reports, not the political highlight talking points. If we're going to save it, you got to actually buy a calculator, put batteries in it, and start sitting down with people like me who passionately are going to protect seniors. We're going to protect our promise, but I can't do it without you. I have divided government here. I have a president up there that got up and said things that were mathematically absurd. And the family motto, the math will always win. And it always does. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, may I ask how much time I have left?
The gentleman has 12 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I've done this chart, and there's an update on this chart coming in a couple weeks. And I'm told it's going to look substantially uglier. But this is the reality. And remember, this chart was built like 2 years ago. Every dime of the $114 trillion of borrowing in today's dollars that we expect to have 30 years from now, 75% of it is functionally Medicare, 25% is if we actually reach into the general fund and backfill the collapse of the Social Security Trust Fund, which happens in 10 years. Oh, and the rest of the budget is actually calculated to have about $1.9 trillion positive. We got old. I'm a baby boomer. I'm a crazy baby boomer. I have a 7-month-old. Greatest little boy you ever met. I wanted to bring a big picture of him. He's so cute. And I will do whatever's necessary to protect my kids. But this is the truth. Unless this is part of every conversation around here, we're not telling the truth, because this is going to drive every discussion of policy. I want to spend more on defense. Have you figured out this? I want to spend more on the environment. Have you figured out this? I want to help other countries. Have I figured out this? Unless you're willing to work on the morality of, here's what's about to happen to us because it's our demographics. Are you going to adopt policies from the immigration, the tax code, to technology, to everything that grows like crazy this nation? And then are you going to take on the cartels that cost us so much money? Are you going to actually build a world where we crash the price of healthcare because you use technology, because you cured diseases? And some of that may be utopian. We don't have a choice. And for everyone else who says saying, well, I just want my money back. If you're someone out there who will say, for Social Security and Medicare, just give me my money back, we will take that deal in a second. Now, people forget, Social Security is progressive. If you're a lower income worker, you work your 40 quarters, you get actually quite a spiff on the taxes you paid. If you're a higher income worker on Social Security and you had your 40 quarters, you actually get less than you actually paid in. But the average, if you do the mean, a couple on Social Security, you will have paid in about $625,000 in taxes over your 40 quarters, and you're going to get back $698,000. Now, you would have made a hell of a lot more money if you'd been allowed to take a portion of that, put it in the markets. President Bush tried doing that. He got the crap kicked out of him by the left. So fine, you're poorer today, but you do get, for the average American, you get your money back. You get a little spiff on Social Security. What the primary driver of those debt numbers is this right here. That average couple will have put in $161,000 over that lifetime of work into the Medicare. And understand, the Medicare taxes you pay, the Medicare Trust Fund is the Part A. 3/4 of Medicare actually comes right out of the general fund, and that's what this is. So you put in 161, you get about 522, and we expect that number to go up fairly dramatically in the next sets of calculations. It is this gap right here that is primary driver of U.S. sovereign debt. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, at some point here, you find out, does telling the truth actually get you in trouble? Because I can't tell you, my brothers and sisters here are really smart. They're truly experts in different things. And I swear they run away from me in the hallway when they see me carrying my charts, saying, David, I don't want to know, because if I tell my constituents that, they get mad at me for telling them the truth. Every day we wait, these numbers get worse. And you had a State of the Union there saying, oh, everything's fine, we're doing great. At one level, that's immoral, because this is coming. And remember, 10 years from now, it's not long. These are 30-year, or these are lifetime charts. It's fixable. And for people saying, well, just get rid of all that other stuff of mandatory spending except for my earned benefits. Okay, maybe we should. But the chart, this is the chart of, this is Social Security, this is the other mandatory, this is mostly health care, parts of this is actually Medicaid. You start looking at, this is nutrition support, EITC, Social Security supplemental income, but you start to see everything else that's in mandatory is pretty darn small. Now, doesn't mean some of these shouldn't be looked at and reformed or be put back on budget, but you see it's these two programs. It's Social Security and health care that are almost everything. I'm absolutely committed. I am going to keep my promises. I'm going to have this country keep its promises. But the only way we will do that is this body, this campus, every smart staffer around here, every lobbyist that walks in our doors that has a soul, bathe in the math. Let's get creative. Let's promote economic growth in every lever we can. Let's legalize technology. Let's legalize disruption and disrupt the price of delivering health care. It can be done. Dear God, I have a 7-month-old. Doesn't he deserve a future? With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.